My name is Richard, and this presentation is all about earth. This presentation is for the Stoke Village Hub. The theme, the element is earth, but it's all to do with that element, earth, and the history associated with it in the Stoke area. Now, earth is another precious commodity that we rely on to survive, like all the other elements that we've talked about. And earth is another precious thing that our ancient ancestors used to applaud and praise and cherish. It's one of those things that throughout the world we call Mother Earth still today. And it's this magical thing that the earth comes alive and goes to sleep. Mother Earth really comes awake, as we know, in the seasons of spring, where things really come out of the ground. We plant something and then it magically comes up with the aid of other elements, obviously, but earth is where it's bedded in. It's where the seeds really settle and grow. So we thank Mother Earth. Our ancients used to call Mother Earth Danu. There's other names as well, but this Mother Earth instinct is looking after your community here in Stoke. Up in the village in ancient times, along with the water, you had earth as your main keeper. It's like today. You can actually stand on earth. When you look at air, you can see it, but you can feel it. Water, you can see through it, but there's something underneath it. Earth seems to be like a place where it's secure. You know you're all right. At sea could be dangerous, air, fire, as we talked about, but earth, I feel more secure. Now, these settlements in the early days were really looking at the terrain, and we know from Stoke that it was, when you look at the Domesday Book, and it refers to Stoke when it was taken over by the Normans, because we're talking about good earth, good land is productive land. So if you had a good place like Stoke is at that time, you could produce real good livestock, real good crops. So Stoke had the right terrain for that. So good earth, good land. And even when you go back in time, people were settled here and made it perfect. Rituals were here thanking Mother Earth. We know that. Thanking Mother Earth has also been adopted by the Christian element in the Saxon times. Again, we looked at different sort of like Wales and things like that, places to thank, but also when you have a religion, you're also having churches where you're sort of like a pilgrimage across land. You're starting to get early sort of communities relating to each other a bit more using the Christian faith at the time. So you're crossing these terrains of land, and especially Stoke, well, here we have some of these churches, but in Stoke we know we had early Saxon churches, and that would have been at the lower part of Stoke, Lower Stoke as we know today, where Stoke Danville Church is today. The land that we're looking at the time was nearly 1,000 acres in the Saxon times. It was taken over by the Normans, and it had about 25 inhabitants listed, plus livestock and things like that. Now, when you think about 25 people, that doesn't sound very much, but you really got to look at that these 25 people were the notable people, the people that were able to pay a tax. Not women, not children, not slaves or anything like that. Were sort of, well, some slaves were mentioned in the Domesday Book, but the important people were classed as the inhabitants, and that's what you have here. So this plethora of landowners were handed down over time. So you had a lots of, let's say, the Normans who came over here. So we have the first Norman taking over from the Saxons, and the Saxon there was called Brismar, and he obviously relinquished the lands to the Norman conquerors at the time, and his was called Diamor, okay, and he came from northern France and settled and had this parcel of land handed over to him. as victors, as conquerors of our country at the time. Good land would have had the inhabitants paying tax, increase of population, making more money out of the area, the earth as it was, making it a bit more productible, but more sort of correlations with other sort of French lords at the time. So there was a bit more integration going on money-wise as long as trade. So it's a bit more increase. But over time, and again with changes of the royalty at the time, lands were taken away and then given to other people. So we have here, we have the Courtney family, the Kemyell family and Branscomb family. Now that comes from looking at family trees where parcels of inheritance would go over to different types of the family. So all these people were the landowners, but not actually working on the land. They were looking for tax payments back. So these people worked at the land would have to work for these lords of the time. Now we've got some of these lords we might know today, reading through history books, and one of these was the Wise family, and they were quite a wealthy family, and they actually built there's a place called Mount Wise, and they really set up the lovely building, sort of like Jacobean building where Mount Wise is today. So this 975 acres of land that the Wise family inherited through all the way back in time, really stretched from Stonehouse Creek northwards all the way up to Kemyell and a little bit further on, and really up to, let's say, what we now know is Central Park today. So that's the whole area. So it's a whole Devonport dockyard, that vast area, mostly farmland. He's decided to put on a manor house of some massive estate on a property, funny enough, on a hill, but not Stoke, strangely enough. Parcels of land of Stoke started to be divided up. This is again through the family trees and bits and pieces. But one was Sir William Morice, who bought a parcel of land, and he bought it for about £11,000, which is extremely a lot of money today, millions, I should imagine. But he bought that parcel of land, which sits really west of what we know as Stoke today. Other parcels of land were sort of like carved up and handed up, and when we get to the Auburn family, who owned most of the area as well, and they were quite an interesting group of people as well. And we're talking about the 1740s, so it's the early time of the Auburn family. Now the Auburn family really stamped their stamp on the place, and even in Devonport today you still have St Albans Church. So St Albans family were running the show for quite a considerable time. However, one of the relatives of the Auburn family owners had a lot of children, let's say, before marriage. And therefore, when he died, the land and his title disappeared. And it wasn't really reinstated until Queen Victoria stepped in and handed over the property eventually to one of his relations, and that was his son Edward, who became later Lord St Leven. So the title had changed. Now let's go back in time. Let's have a look at the landscape in the medieval times. Seasonal things. It's ingrained really after time. We would go back to the Bronze Age period, early farming. It's amazing now we've learned to use the seasons of the year, looking at weather, but also looking at the earth, looking at the texture of it. What do we need to feed it with? Tending to it. When it gives us something, let's say a field of corn or wheat, we've got to say thank you to it. We've got to say that this field has given us wonderful treasure, especially like barley and wheat. So we've got beer, we've got bread, we've got sustenance, we've got cattle, we've got sheep on there. It's looking after the land. It's tending to the land. Make sure it's going to sleep. Make sure it's going to sleep nicely and then wake up for the next season, the next following year. Now, to say thank you to these things, and we've seen the motifs put into the trees, we've seen sort of blessings of wells and things like that. But in the land aspect, and what we still make, and some people do today, is to leave something behind. Now, in the hay fields or things like, there used to be what we call stooks. Okay, these are the little bundles of hay, and one would be left behind. But back in time, people used to make what they call corn dollies, and these corn dollies are quite regional throughout the country. So each sort of area or village would have had its own style of corn dolly, which was placed in the middle of the field as a thank you. Now, even though time had changed, let's say from the Georgian to the Victorian times, and even mid-Victorian times, the land was still pretty damn good for crops and things like that. When you look at the terrain of Plymouth, Stonehouse, Devonport, once it's been sort of like built on, most of the farming area is gone. It's the geology of Stoke that gives you good earth, fantastic drainage for producing vegetables, things like that. So when you look at maps like this, you'll see nurseries, you'll see orchards, that sort of fruit trees in abundance. It's perfect for that. Perfect also for doing a bit of naughty stuff like scrumping, things like that, which was quite common because a lot of people used to forage, and they're quite used to forage in sort of like hedgerows and that sort of thing. So when they come across a sort of orchard, they thought, well, you know, nobody's looking, I'll just pop in and probably grab a few apples. But orchards were quite precious, especially here in Devon, as you can imagine, the cider country. So you had pear cider and you had apple cider, and that was known as scrumping. So what did they used to do to deter like people like that was to actually put geese inside these orchards, and anybody coming in would alert and make a noise. Scrumping. Apples are precious though. Comes from Mother Earth, makes these wonderful trees, and these trees are, again, have their own presence, as we've spoken about before, but they come from the ground. They're steadfast. They sort of like pulsate through the whole year, okay? And one of the most precious of these is the apple tree. And the apple tree is symbolic, really, is the last fruit of the year. It flowers early. It takes a while for this precious apple. You could preserve an apple. You could make wonderful drinks from an apple. You could do all sorts of things. It sweetens things. When you think in the medieval times, there wasn't much in the way of, like we have today, sweets. The taste of sugar, basically. So an apple and a pear, something sweet and juicy like that, was quite precious. So, again, we would say, thank you. Thank you, tree, for giving us that. And that ritual is known as the wassail. So the wassail is it's coming back into its own way, but it's really a traditional way of thanking a tree. You thank the tree for providing for you. And that's always been the sort of ancient times of Celtic, Saxon times, even with the religion attaching some of these ways into their sort of beliefs, integrated. It's always saying, thank you to Earth, thank you for that, thank you for giving us that. Wassail, singing to the trees. But the terrain of Plymouth and Earth, I mean, we produce stuff, we eat stuff, animals eat stuff, but they also get rid of stuff, and we call it poo. But poo is actually quite important. It's also earth. You push it back into the earth. You can keep it for a while, and you can actually, it's like an enrichment back into the earth. Once you dig it in, it's, well, it's a manure, it's a fertilizer basically, but it's natural in the old days. So much so that even when in medieval times, if a horse or something like that went past your property or where you were renting, let's say, that little parcel outside your road, let's say, or lane, was really what you had to tend to and keep. And that was the ancient way of looking after things. So if suddenly a horse went by and pooed in the road, that was your little gift, let's say, from that horse, which you could use and then put into your allotment garden or whatever at the back. So really, people were looking out for this little gems now and again, quite strangely. But this was still happening in the Victorian times, like this picture here. You can see that there is poo in the street. People would have gone out with a little shovel and things and then sort of planted them for the roses, especially in the Victorian times when everybody was into flowers in a big way. With that, the nurseries have changed as well from vegetables to flowers. A lot of people liked flowers, and people had a bit more, well, there's another language, let's put it that way. Even today, the Victorians looked at flowers to say something to somebody secretly. So you're looking at trees that we look at, bless and thank you, but also there's a language within plants, especially flowers, given to people, and that was really sort of blossomed during the Victorian times. So collecting poo was one thing for these lovely sort of nurseries, and a lot of that was going on. A lot of people would be interested to know that not only poo was collected, but the other effluent, or wee as well, and you could actually get paid for collecting your wee into little pots, and you would leave them outside, and the dung man would come along, collect the dung and the wee as well. The wee was used for tanning leather and dyeing, that sort of thing, to make it soft, so the tanners would actually want that stuff, whereas the poo would actually go mixed with potash to go with the fertilizer. But there is an expression that if you didn't have a pot to pee in, you were known as piss poor. Other things about this wonderful hill, which Stoke Village is on, is the need for building materials. Now, as we know, Stoke isn't like Plymouth with limestone, hard stone. Stoke is more like a Shillet. Okay, so it's interesting when you look at the buildings around Stoke Village today. The makeup of the building is actually, like you say, in old times, what the village is made of, ancient times, is what it's made of from the terrain, from the earth around it. So you're looking at the old buildings of Stoke Village at the top, and you'll notice a lot of this Shillet is being used for the high walls and for the buildings. Now, Shillet as a building material is pretty good. You need a lot of lime, okay, so a limestone in between. But to quarry Shillet, you needed quite a lot of it to build walls. And when you look around Stoke, you will see these Shillet walls. Now, where's the quarry? Well, the quarry was round the corner next to the old reservoir, Bowden's Reservoir, and it was known as Penlee Quarry. Why it was called Penlee Quarry, I have no idea. Unfortunately, with quarries, it takes away a lot of the nature of the area, because there would have been a big hill there, as big as the hill where the Blockhouse Park is today. And that has been levelled to something like 80 to 90 feet. Of that area is missing because the quarry has taken it all away. Now, this is a sort of cross-section of the quarry that I found in the box, and it shows you the illustration of this quarry. The owners of the Stoke at the time were still leasing out these quarries to people, so they had to produce as much material as possible to pay the rent, and time after time after time they weren't producing enough, so a lot of this quarry kept collapsing as a business. But to make the quarry work, they had to dig tunnels inside it to move away the water that was collecting behind it. So this is actually cross-section showing you the little tiny tunnels that they had to build underneath so they can start quarrying it away so it's nice and dry, that sort of thing. Okay, so a lot of that was going on. Further down, where Milehouse is, where the bus station is a different, slightly different terrain. It's more farmy earth sort of like stuff. It was probably washed down over a millennia of time, but it's a thick deposit of earth, and it's like a mud, and that's perfect for brick making. And that's where Brickworks was, roughly where the behind the bus station basically. So there was a great big Brickworks there, and this Brickworks was also came at the right time with the Shillet as well, because these bricks were nice and square, and they'd be perfect for your sort of window frames and doorways. And then your Shillet would be in fills in the wall. This is an aerial photograph showing you the old tram sheds and that at Milehouse. Milehouse is so named because it's a mile away from Plymouth, and it was also the end stop of a coach where a lot of people from Plymouth, if they wanted to enjoy the countryside of Stoke, which it was, to get away from that sort of like congestion of Plymouth and that sort of filthiness, they just wanted fresh air like most people do today, would actually pay to get on a coach, go out to Milehouse, sit there amongst the fields and enjoy the area. This photograph is also showing you the area where the Brickworks was. It is now gone. That was taken over by a cemetery. Now this cemetery isn't shown in this map, but the cemetery was only there for quite a while. What this ancient map shows you is actually what was going on. It's quite an unusual map because it's actually telling you where a pig pen is, where the horse tackle place was, where they're getting horses tamed, that sort of thing. So it's a bit more detailed than the normal map. It just gives you a name of a place. It's telling you where toll gates are. And they're interesting too, because lots of the ancient lanes weren't tended to as much as they were. So you needed toll roads at the time. This map here shows you actually a detail of the churchyard. And the Brickworks is exactly where the chapel and churchyard was later built on. So that's the same footprint. The cottages on the side there were still known as brickwork cottages. They're still there, but also now they've been changed into a sort of bungalow area. Cutting through it was St Anne's stream. We needed that water there to make the clay into bricks. But strangely enough, it was piped when they put a graveyard there. That graveyard stayed there till about 1967, where it was finally closed and taken over by the electricity board, big SWEB, Southwest Electricity Board, and made into an electrical complex, which is still there today. Talk about tow roads though. I mean, a lot of these early carts and way of transport were very rare actually. Lots of people did walk from place to place, but because of the nature of the farming and the nature of carts getting bigger and the populations nearby getting bigger, most of these roads were very badly attended to, especially within rain, the mud and everything. You get bogged down into things. So some of these roads then had to be tended to and paid for. So what they did then was actually put toll gates in. So the tolls would then not only go to the landowner yet again, but also to pay for the upkeep of these roads to make it easier for carts to get through. However, I mean, even today, there are still pockets of green. There's still pockets of, you can see the old streams, you can see the old trees there, the old landscape that's never been built on. And luckily also, some of the fields have still got that nursery feel, and we call them allotments today. So you can get an allotment and strips of land, grow your own veg and that sort of thing. But also what I like, because I've looked at these and been there, and now known as sort of St Martin's Fields, because all these fields were named different things, and that's another issue when you look at ancient type maps of Stoke, that certain fields have certain names for certain reasons, and that's again Earth telling you what it is. But they have here still nurseries as such. We know them as allotments. Now, Second World War time, the need for food, need for water. Okay, we got reservoirs, got lots of water, that sort of thing. Food, getting food to Britain was quite difficult. There was a lot of upsets, as you know, with U-boats destroying many of the food ships that were coming our way. So Earth came back as Mother Earth to us. let's look after earth, let's get it feeding us. So a lot of the parks, any green strips, your backyard, chickens, using your earth, using your poo, you were using every scrap of land to try and make food. So it was called Dig for Britain. With that, you had land army girls that would come out to the fields, work on the local farms as well, because most of the men were at war. A lot of this Dig for Britain stuff was done by women, the land army. And here they are working along. They did all sorts of things. Again, tending to the land, looking after the land. They were the mainstay of our food basket, using the earth. They quickly got around to how to work with Mother Nature and help us as well. As I was saying, even today, things haven't changed much. I mean, there was a plethora of all this housing in the Victorian periods right up to the Second World War. Hardly anything has changed around Stoke, and that's why it retains that lovely, slightly country feel when you go around looking at some of the buildings today, the big houses, the high Shillet walls that you'll see. It's reminding you that we've come to a point where it's got its own identity in the three towns, let's say, around it, but Stoke has a unique sort of earth feel. Thank you for watching.